There's something about stoicism and masculinity that draws a person towards them. Their driven nature or their one-track mind and conviction towards a cause can make people weak in the knees. It isn't surprising that the Sword Maiden is attracted to the Goblin Slayer. The calm and compassionate exterior hides the depression and anxiety she caused in her childhood when she was held captive by the goblins. Speaking in human world terms, she is an example of a strong, independent woman who makes it big in the outside world. Inside, she is the little submissive girl who was forced to let go of her childhood and become an adult early on due to traumatic events. Independent women, more often than not, sought out hardcore masculine men who could protect them and also challenged them to do their best. However, in the anime world terms, Sword Maiden's relationship with the Goblin Slayer is intricate, intense, and complicated for a variety of reasons. Reasons like her position as the High Priestess and the Goblin Slayer being a lowly adventurer, her love for the Goblin Slayer originating from trauma, to name a few. Although the human traits of hiding scars from trauma hold good in her case, Sword Maiden's feelings for the Goblin Slayer run deeper than him being her knight in the shining armor. From the looks of it, we might see the Sword Maiden expressing her love for the Goblin Slayer, and she might try starting a relationship at the end of Season 2. This video will dig into the details about the hints dropped by the series that support the argument. How does the Sword Maiden and Goblin Slayer meet for the first time? After the Goblin Slayer completes yet another crusade of killing goblins and saving nuns at a church on a normal day, the whole group, which includes the priestess, the high elf archer, the dwarf shaman, and the lizard priest, along with a cowgirl and the guild girl, are preparing for a celebration. Goblin Slayer, the lizard priest, and the dwarf shaman are seen unloading and loading crates of what seemed like ancient rock inscriptions, clothes, and jewelry for a certain someone. The next scene cuts to the Goblin Slayer pulling the cart to the Archbishop's castle. He asks if the Archbishop has been sleeping enough and sleeping soundly, and the nun assures him that she has been sleeping like a baby. The Goblin Slayer walks into a big hall where he sees the Archbishop praying. The two of them exchange greetings and she refers to someone's recovery atop the mountain. It turns out she was a survivor of a goblin attack and is now gradually recovering. Do you think it is the Goblin Slayer's sister? Let us know in the comments. The Archbishop, Sword Maiden, asks the Goblin Slayer what he thought about her, to which he says he heard about her during his travels. She pouts as it looks like the Goblin Slayer had little to no thoughts about her. They shift their focus to deciphering a stone text. She infers that the stone text is old and can incite magic too, but she couldn't talk more about it. The Goblin Slayer lost interest in the conversation and made his way out, saying that a friend of his had invited him to a gathering. The Archbishop is visibly offended and distraught, but she lets him leave, telling him to be careful while traveling by the riverside. This encounter is a major giveaway that the Archbishop, Sword Maiden, was fond of the Goblin Slayer for a long time. She was also a tad bit dramatic about the Goblin Slayer leaving, as though he was his significant other who hadn't spent much time with her. Why does the Sword Maiden hate goblins? How does it affect her relationship with the Goblin Slayer? The Sword Maiden hates goblins because of her experience of being held captive, which caused her PTSD. Her fear and hatred for goblins is so overwhelmingly strong that even mentioning the word goblin in a conversation with her would send shivers down her spine. Back when she was held captive, she begged for help, but nobody stepped up to help her, as they believed that a former gold-ranked adventurer shouldn't fear lowly creatures like goblins and should be able to fight them herself. Later, she was unable to deal with the goblins terrorizing the sewers of her city. She hired adventurers to kill them. While this is going on, the goblins are dragging the princess into the dungeon of the dead, and the king has appointed a Sword Maiden to save her without taking her past into account. This trauma affects her relationship with the Goblin Slayer, as she sees him as the knight in shining armor who helps her lessen her trauma and the resultant phobia of goblins. His stoic hardline conviction of eradicating each and every single goblin brings a sense of hope, comfort, and security to her. However, the Sword Maiden's feelings for the Goblin Slayer are one-sided. After finishing a quest, she approached him and asked if he understood what she felt for him. He bluntly denied it. His sole objective and motto in life is to exterminate goblins, and so he promised her that he would kill any goblin that harms her, even if they are in her dreams. He will always be there to kill them. Although she was dejected, this assurance did make her feel passionate about the adventurer. Does the Sword Maiden love the Goblin Slayer? Is he aware of it? If not love, it is clear that the Sword Maiden is strongly infatuated by the idea of the Goblin Slayer. We say idea because the Goblin Slayer's act of slaying those who tortured and traumatized the Sword Maiden has a healing effect on her. But it is also possible that the Sword Maiden is in love with the Goblin Slayer, as he is portrayed like Sir Lancelot, if not anything else. He has the cowgirl, the priestess, the guild girl, and the female elf around him, but he doesn't pay attention to them. This is seen in episode 9 when the Goblin Slayer takes the Sword Maiden and the rest of his group on a quest and stops by to talk to the cowgirl. As the carriage stops, the Sword Maiden asks the priestess who he is talking to. Even as she asks, she is visibly jealous per se. Later that night, she tries to start a conversation with the Goblin Slayer, but as seen throughout the series, he doesn't seem like someone who could sustain a conversation, so the Sword Maiden's efforts don't reap the results she expected. And no, he isn't aware that the Sword Maiden has feelings for him, but even if he knew, he wouldn't be bothered about it, as all he cares about is killing goblins in quest. What is the future of the Sword Maiden and Goblin Slayer's relationship? As we see in episode 10, the Sword Maiden is teaching the Goblin Slayer about how he should be supportive of a woman crying and why that is important as it comforts her. Her body language also gives hints that she is obviously attracted to him. Given that he has never really had a woman in such close proximity before, it is safe to say that the Goblin Slayer would pick up hints of someone being interested in him. It is possible that by the end of Season 2, the relationship between the Sword Maiden and the Goblin Slayer grows into a friendship, if not a romantic relationship to start off with. Marvelous verdict. Whether it is love, infatuation, or lust, it is clear that the Sword Maiden is strongly attracted to the Goblin Slayer. The roots and reasons behind the attraction may seem controversial and conflicting to many, as it is quite obvious that she suffers from PTSD and finds her favorite person in the Goblin Slayer. If you observe closely, it is evident that the Sword Maiden's feelings go beyond mere admiration and respect. Her social status doesn't keep her from expressing her vulnerability to him, as she feels safe with him. It is up to the Goblin Slayer to understand and realize what she feels. If he reciprocates this or not, it depends on whether he can divert his attention from killing goblins. This is also an interesting aspect that the anime has yet to give context to. The Goblin Slayer being so dedicated to his title could be because of a deep-rooted and unprocessed trauma that has set him on a path to becoming a killing machine, but we have a hunch that he might open up to the elf or the priest as he trusts them more than the Sword Maiden, who has recently joined him in his quest. It would be pedophilic if the anime showed a romantic relationship between the Goblin Slayer and the priestess, but it can be said that she is one of the primary female members of the group who has had the Goblin Slayer's attention throughout the series.